Live. We often hear from research economist Joey Von Nessen from USC. Now we get a chance to sit down live with you. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
All right, so here is the issue, I guess, right now as a journalist. We want always to be truthful with our News 19 viewers and explain exactly what is happening. But this has sort of changed every day. The latest thing that President Trump has said about tariffs, most of the tariffs go on April the 2nd. And the ones we have, some temporary ones and some small ones, relatively small, although it's a lot of money, having to do with Mexico and Canada. It's been back and forth. How does that uncertainty affect the economy right now at this moment that we're in?
Well, right now it makes it difficult for businesses, particularly large manufacturers, to plan for the future, because manufacturers specifically are looking at long-term strategies for making investment decisions, making production decisions, and they have to look 12, 24 months out, even longer. And so when you have this level of uncertainty, it tends to breed paralysis. That's a term we like to use. Uncertainty breeds paralysis, because when they are uncertain about the market environment, what they're likely to face, what the cost structure is likely to be for their supply chain and their customer base, that causes them to adopt a wait-and-see approach. Just when do we see this resolution? What does the tariff landscape look like realistically for the foreseeable future? Then they can begin to make some decisions. So that backs them into a wait-and-see position.
All right, and speaking of the wait and see, we know this has been put off for a month now. How do you perceive that to have an effect on things?
Well, I think businesses are going to continue to wait and see, and it can postpone investment decisions in the short run. From a consumer perspective, they are looking at the potential to see whether or not we're going to experience further price increases. So the consumers are looking at a situation in which they've lost purchasing power since the pandemic began in 2020. So, for example, prices have risen over the last 5 years or so by about 25% compared to wages, which are up by about 20%. So going into 2025, consumers were already trying to claw back that purchasing power. They're still worse off from a purchasing power perspective. And so now the uncertainty about whether or not inflation is going to tick back up later this year.
Just out of curiosity, because you mentioned that, how do you get those two numbers equal? How much we are all getting paid more and how much goods and services are costing us? What is the best way to get those two to equal out?
Yeah, that's a great question, because prices typically don't come down. Once they go up,
right. They never give that money back to us,
exactly.
Joey.
That's where we are. So
yeah.
What we have to look at is wage growth over the long run. And that's really the good news where we are right now, and a turning point that we hit in 2024. Wages are now growing at about 4% annually on average. Prices are growing at about 3% on average. That's the underlying inflation rate. So wages are growing faster than prices, so consumers are clawing back that lost purchasing power. It's not a very exciting message that it's going to take time for wages to catch back up, but we're moving in the right direction. And so the concern over tariffs, if we see them implemented in a significant way, is that it could stall that progress or at least delay it.
Let's talk about this. We know South Carolina is a big car state. You know, we've got Volvo, we've got BMW, we've got Continental Tire, we've got, our new Scout Motors coming. How is this uncertainty affecting automakers, and what about all the car parts that we import, parts for our American-made cars from other countries?
Well, we do import a lot of car parts for the manufacturing process, so that certainly impacts the potential for cost changes, and that can flow through to the consumer. If these manufacturers are paying more for inputs, they, in some cases, pass that on to the consumer. And then we also have to look at the potential for retaliatory tariffs, meaning that if the U.S. imposes tariffs, then if other countries impose retaliatory tariffs in response to that, then goods that are produced in South Carolina and exported abroad could see an increase in prices too. And so that could affect the demand for these manufacturers as well. So you've got really direct effects from the tariffs from the U.S. and the indirect effects from these potential retaliatory tariffs. But again, all of this is uncertain. We don't know where this is going to land. So the uncertainty is really the key component of where we are right now.
All right, let's talk about this because you're talking about retaliatory tariffs. South Carolina is also a huge farming state, and our farmers look at the future, think about what to plant, think about what would be advantageous to plant, think about what crops we need in America and what they will ship out to other countries. If there is a retaliatory tariff, how will that affect our farmers who are often already struggling in this economy?
Well, they certainly have to take that into account as well. And we export a lot of what we produce in South Carolina, soybeans, cotton, among others. So it's another factor of, in their situation, having to wait and see, not knowing about what to expect with respect to potential prices, and that impacting the planning process as they look ahead.
All right, let's talk to our consumers right now, looking at us going, I don't know, what is going to happen to our friends who want to buy cars, who want to buy houses, who want to plan for the future, who might be apartment living in our state and hoping that that American dream is still possible. What's your message to them tonight as to what our next few years will be like and thinking about making those bigger purchases?
Well, I think the good news is that it's been very clear that the Trump administration, both this administration and the previous administration, they're very clear that this is a negotiating strategy. Now, whether that will be successful, to what extent it will be successful, we obviously don't know. But it does imply that where we stand today is not where these tariffs are going to land in the long run.
Right.
And so if this is a temporary disruption, it does create that uncertainty, but it means that it could be more likely to be temporary. So that's what we're looking at right now. And again, it comes back to that uncertainty statement. And I think that's really the key word. The other factor with respect to consumers that it's important to recognize is that if we do see say a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico, that doesn't mean that every item that's purchased at the store is going to be going up by 25%,
sure.
Because there are multiple steps in the distribution process, and it's only marked up one time when it's imported. So it's important to keep in context what these tariffs really mean. So these numbers do not translate one-to-one to what a consumer is likely to see at Walmart or at the grocery store and so forth.
Let's certainly hope not. Nobody wants to see everything going up by 25%. Joey Von Nessen, research economist, thank you for your brilliance as always and trying to explain it to us. I'm thinking we're going to need you back in the near future.
Well, thank you for having me. Anytime. Glad to be here.
All right, guys.